Hello everyone, this is Tim, and this is going to be a video about what kind of GM am I. This is a response to the Gentleman Gamer, Mr. Clack Click Bang. So I wanted to go through and just watch his video again, see if there's anything I needed to hit. I took a little series of notes here. In a lot of ways, I think I'm similar to the Gentleman Gamer, but a little bit different in my own regard. I also like freeform, sandboxy type campaigns, but I do like to mix it up from time to time. And depending on what the group and the players are like, sometimes I have to sort of adjust that if the game is stagnating or if the players don't seem to be responding to that unlimited potential, whatever they want to choose kind of format. So you really have to look at your group, and it's probably often been said, but you have to adjust the way you do things to the way that they do things. If it's not working, if something's not jiving, if something's not really, the communication isn't flowing back and forth, and there's something wrong, you kind of have to look at it like a doctor would look at it like an illness or something. What's going on? What do I need to do to change up some stuff? And I tend to do that. If I notice that the free-form sandboxy type style isn't working for them, I'll throw more concrete options at them. Like, well, here's like 4 or 5 or 6 options. Pick one of these, and then maybe that'll give us some direction. And once we start going down like one of those directions, then we can go back to that sandboxy, free-form, unlimited choices kind of format. But some people just don't seem to respond well to that all the time. So I'm willing to, that's my preferred style, but I'm willing to, and I understand that some people just don't get it, or they don't respond to it very well, or that they just kind of get that deer in the headlights kind of, whoa, there's too many choices, I don't know which one to take. So I'm willing to change up my style to fit my player group a little bit more. Some other comments that he put, the Gentleman Game also likes stuff going on behind the scenes, and I think that really makes the setting come alive. If there's stuff going on that has nothing to do with the player characters and their group, that just makes it feel like it's a real world, because let's face it, there's all kinds of stuff going on in the world right now as I'm doing this video, and I have nothing to do with it. It's happening regardless of what I do. It doesn't really matter. So there might be things like there's wars, there's alliances between kingdoms, maybe there's some sort of plague going on, maybe there's a breed of monsters that's for whatever reason starting to multiply like crazy. I always mention the example of stink bugs. For whatever reason, in the last year, there have been tons of stink bugs in western Pennsylvania. They're just everywhere. My wife is always like, there's another stink bug, take care of it. And I don't think they have many natural predators, so that would be a possible example for some sort of monster race out there that, for whatever reason, if they don't have natural predators or they come to a new place and they just start breeding like crazy, that could be happening in the background. So there's all kinds of stuff like that that can go on. He mentioned about dead adventurers. In my current Labyrinth Lord game, they have stumbled across, especially on the surface level, lots of sort of like evidences of adventurers being there, doors being kicked open, places being ransacked, treasures that adventurers have found, they've buried, so, for when they came back, but they never came back because they died down in the dungeon. They found, just rotting corpses of adventurers that have, adventuring type gear on them. In some ways, those are actually probably more beneficial to the characters, especially at low level, than just finding a bunch of gold, because it's very useful stuff, possibility of magic items and so forth. So I've definitely used dead adventurers. I've had in my head thoughts of, okay, there's a bunch of groups of adventurers. I mean, I'm running a dungeon site, a dungeon campaign. So there have been other groups of adventurers, and I try to think about, okay, what did this group do? Where did they go? Where did they die? What goodies did they have on them? Things like that. I don't tend to like linear games. The only time I will run close to a linear game is at a convention. But even then, I don't really think in a linear or plot type fashion. things like, dungeon one-shots are very easy. What's nice about them is in the dungeon themselves, they have options built in. Do you go left? Do you go right? Is there a four-way intersection? And I don't think linearly in a dungeon even then, because you don't know which way they're going to go. And especially if it's a larger dungeon, you really have no idea which way they're going to take. And I kind of like it that way. If the big bad guy is to the right, and they go right, maybe like half hour into the session, they might not be prepared for the big guy, but at least they'll know where he is. Maybe they need to have some sort of artifact to kill him, or maybe they need some information that's in another part of the dungeon. Well, that's up to them. It is random chance, but if I would probably give them some sort of clue that maybe this is a little bit more powerful than they can handle, or something like that. But I'm willing to just let them make their own decisions, come up with, have consequences for those decisions. And, I try to be tough but fair. In the past, I've kind of been a softie when it comes to players. I'm starting to get a little bit more of a hard edge to me, but I definitely like to be fair. I love to give options, and I love to reward creative players in game, really. And if you want to try to do something, I'll look at the mechanics and I'll look at the system, and I'll figure out a way to make it happen, even if it's not in the rules. I have no problem with that. When Tetsuba was talking about rules that have holes in them, that doesn't really bother me. I fill holes like a champion. I'm like the kid that's sticking his finger in the dike, except I have like 1,000 arms, so it really doesn't bother me. What else we got in here? The way that I prepare settings and campaigns is usually I'll make up a few powerful NPCs, maybe even some smaller ones. Not a ton, just enough to kind of get my bearings on things. Or sometimes I'll just come up with a group, like in like a White Wolf game. Here's a sect of vampires over here, or here's a clan of vampires over there. Here's maybe what their goals are, and those are the only sort of overarching plot, if you call it that I have. It's just, here's a bunch of people, here's what their goals are, and other than that, I really don't come up with a plot or a story, because in my experience, players like to throw big wrenches in that stuff anyway, and I like to take what the players are giving me and weave that into the campaign. I really like taking player ideas and incorporating them, because normally they're like 10 times better than my ideas anyway. So I'm very good, or at least I try to be good, at really taking their input, taking their paranoid delusions, their fears of enigmas and stuff, and actually just weaving that right into the game. I really like doing that, because it's a nice surprise for me too. If I would do everything that I had planned, it'd kind of be a boring session for me. I really feed off of that player energy. But also setting. For instance, I'm going to be running a midnight game at some point in the near future. It's going to be an evil game where they're all playing evil priest legates. And for me, the preparation for that is to read the setting books, get some of the fluff for the setting, maybe some idea of what NPCs are running things, different territories in there, maybe some ideas for what kind of characters might be available for different, if everyone's going to be a cleric, how can I differentiate them, what will make them different. Maybe they have like the certain little niches that each of them could fill. So that's what I'm thinking about at this point. Like I said, I'm not a real big plot guy. I've never really sort of storyboarded out where I wanted things to go. I really even haven't done the web thing that the Gentleman Gamer was thinking, because that means that you have to have an endpoint in mind, and a lot of times I don't have an endpoint in mind, because depending on what the players decide and their choices and what avenues of adventure they want to go down, that end goal could really be like 30 or 40 different things. It all depends on what they want to do and what kind of game or genre I'm running. Probably the endpoint, I guess, for my Labyrinth Lord game that I'm running right now, I made a big ass dungeon, mapped the whole thing out. I actually did it old school with just ink in graph paper, and I came up with a big bad guy. I figured out why the dungeon exists, maybe some sort of history for that, and when I prep, I'll have like a line of prep for the rooms that do have things. There's a lot of rooms that are empty, but even those have little interesting things that have once been there or used to be there. And then the rest of it is just whatever I come up with a table and what the players come up with as well. So that's probably an example of how I would do plot or how I would do the endpoint. But it's very open-ended when I run things. I'm not a frustrated writer. Like I said, I don't really care about plot. I liked the idea of Grand Theft Auto, except I don't really have that overarching plot. I love that idea of here's a bunch of NPCs, go run amok. Just go and have fun, and wherever you end up is where you end up. Let's see here. Site-based. I've done some site-based. Like I said, this current campaign is a mega dungeon crawl. So this is probably the first time I've ever done anything like this, where it's just a massive ruined pile of stuff, and you start at the top and work your way down. Well, although there is a possibility for them to start lower down because it's a hill, and there's buildings that actually lead down to the lower dungeons. And the reason I wanted to do that is, let's say in the future they've already gone through levels 1 through 6. They might know that hey, this building on the hill here goes straight down to level 7 or whatever. So that was my way of kind of making sure they didn't have to go up and down through 6 levels of dungeon every time they wanted to get down to level 7. But the dungeon thing is a site-based adventure, where it's kind of like the social contract before you start is, hey guys, there's a small town nearby, there's a city that's further away, and there's this big-ass pile, there's just this big dungeon. And that's what the focus of the campaign is going to be. So don't expect to be going from city to city or doing anything, too many wilderness encounters, except for the ones going to and from the dungeon. And all the players are cool with that. They're like, you know what, it's been a long time since I did something like that, so we're going to go ahead and do that. But that might be an additional example for what kind of GM you could be, or campaign style. I don't tend to like mission-based adventures, except for conventions. Those can work out well. Conventions are kind of like the exception to the rule, because you might only have like 4 hours, or if it's a long slot, maybe 8 hours. And you definitely have to have more railroad tracks. Again, it doesn't have to be linear, and you have to just bash everyone over the head if they decide to break that plot. But they are kind of the exception to the rule. Subquests in campaigns are a lot of fun. I look forward to those. When players talk about their characters and what things they're interested in, I always try to weave those in. Sometimes I forget, and I have to look around the table and look at their character sheets from time to time. I've often thought maybe I should have a second copy of everyone's character sheet so that I would have that information whenever I need it, but I haven't actually ever instituted that, so I think if I told my players, hey, make 2 copies of your character sheets, that might be kind of, they might not want to do that, but it's something I've always thought about. And like I said, I like to offer lots of options for character creation, options for the characters to do in game, and if anyone has any cool ideas incorporating the landscape, the terrain, any sort of items that they have that can be used in sort of non-standard ways, I try to incorporate those. If something is impossible, I will tend to not allow that, or I'll be like, hey man, that's just not going to work in this type of genre, this type of campaign. If we were playing some sort of gonzo, comedy campaign or something, yeah, sure, you can do whatever you want, but this is a little bit more serious, or physics actually exist to some point other than how the way the magic affects it. But I think that's pretty much my GMing style. I like rules-lite games, and I just love to give people options, and a lot of it is shooting from a hip at the table and incorporating player ideas. Alright, everybody. I will talk to you guys later.